What it do? This is the Brothers on Books podcast where we find great books that will give you real value and actionable steps and have fun in the process. Please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations or if you'd like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to this would be greatly appreciated. If you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. For the original episodes, the OGs, please visit brothersonbooks.com. And now see the link below for 20% off your matcha needs at Encha Matcha. They even have ceremonial grade matcha, baby. Allie Bear, how are
Hey,
you
Tom.
doing today?
No, I'm doing pretty good, Jack. How you doing?
Doing well, installing a new floor in the house. So that's been taking up a lot of time. Sitting through a workshop the last couple of days, and you were at a pickleball tournament per usual.
I was, and then I guess first for me, I had to retire both days due to cramping, which was very unpleasant.
Dang.
Uh, but you know, I
But
guess it just,
the show must go on.
I guess it just is what it is. I did have a very interesting in one of the cramping experiences. It was a very interesting experience. This woman was nice enough to like massage the cramps out of my legs for the better part of an hour and a half. So, Anne, if you're listening, here's to you. Uh,
Cool. So Al, this episode, I guess, is dedicated to Anne. And what book are we discussing?
we are reading the Diversity Delusion by Heather McDonald. I guess we haven't done an author blurb in a while, but I guess I'll just give a quick background on Heather McDonald. She grew up in California, BA from Yale in '78, then went on to Stanford and got her law degree. Currently is a fellow at the Manhattan Institute, which is a think tank. I guess they do a lot of just sort of economic research. I believe it is, yeah, it is. It is a conservative focused economic or domestic policy and urban affairs think tank. So I guess with that said, Jack, you want to get into it?
Do it.
So I guess what were your initial thoughts?
No, I was a little you've picked a lot of books like this, Al, and they're probably going to get us into trouble with many people. I'm thinking back to the Discrimination and Disparities book, and then the Coddling of the American Mind, which actually was mentioned in this book briefly.
So
So definitely some overlap.
it's funny that you bring up discrimination and disparities because I was recently talking to someone about that episode, and they sent it to a friend, and I think I was then shown a text about how stupid I was for some of my opinions, based off of that episode. But yeah, it is what it is.
Why did they say you were stupid?
They just said I fall for very unwell thought out arguments incredibly easily, and my points are not well founded.
Did they have to do with like the race component? I mean, does this person know that Thomas Sowell actually is black?
I would doubt it. Well, it was one of those weird things where I explained that the distinction was about uh, it was about people aren't if people are racist, they generally aren't racist when it reflects when it influences them in a bad way. Like you're not going to go out of your way to be racist to someone if it hurts you, which was the point of some statistic I brought up, and I reiterated that fact. They then said that they understood that fact. They just said what I was showing didn't prove that, and that it was still stupid to say. So, yeah, I don't know what to say. It had to do with not the point had to do with not renting in the apartheid South Africa, not renting to blacks when you weren't technically allowed to rent to blacks, even though people were in fact still renting to blacks for that reason.
Yeah, bad for business. So I mean, it really makes me feel like we're living in like 1984. Like some of how they're changing definitions around, a lot of the different stuff. I mean, I actually went on Google and just typed in different terms just to see what the definitions are now. Guess what it says? So sexism. What would you say the definition of sexism is?
I would describe sexism as where you discriminate against someone based on their sex. So,
Okay,
like,
it basically says that, but it adds typically against the women. I found that kind of interesting. Like, I found it odd that they even throw that in. And then racism, prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by an individual, community, or institution against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized.
yeah, so a lot of people on the far left will now describe racism as like some type of thing of both privilege versus power. So if you're in a
Mhm.
marginalized minority group, i.e., since you're marginalized or you have no power. So in my opinion, I guess I tried to get a couple. I tried to get a couple people that were very against what this book was saying on, but they did not want to come on to discuss. But
Mhm.
from my understanding, the way that is then defined, it then makes it so if you are in a marginalized group, you then cannot be racist. So, and their from their definition, the way I understand it, like you cannot be racist against white people, which I just think is utterly ridiculous.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when she was digging into the SAT scores between the different races, part of me, initially when she started getting into it, just thinking back to my personal experience, I more thought it had to do with income because I took the ACT the first time. My English score was not good. Mom and dad did pay a woman, I think a couple $100 to go with me a couple times through some of the English. Like I didn't even know honestly what the difference between like IT apostrophe S and then just like ITS. But like those things matter on the ACT, like grammar and English part. So my English score did go up. Now the second time my science score also went up, and I didn't prepare any differently for that. And it was like a 5-point swing. So that I guess speaks to the randomness sometimes just from test to test. But she she could be cherry picking certain dates. I don't exactly know how this data is gathered, but there was a part that actually brought up the income component. And okay, so I'll read this part. The usual poverty explanations for the SAT gap don't hold up. In 1997, white students from households with incomes of $10,000 or less scored better than black students from households with incomes of 80 to 100,000. I mean, that was coming from a study. The notation is why family income differences don't explain the racial gap in SAT scores. This is the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education. I mean, that's pretty interesting. I mean, that's pretty staggering. She then goes on to say, and once again, she could just be cherry picking the years because the years are kind of bouncing around when she's going on. But she says in 2015, students with family incomes of $0 to $20,000, a category that includes all racial groups, had a higher average math SAT score of 455 than the average math SAT score of black students from all income levels, 435. That's like, I mean, I just I don't know
I mean,
how.
I
And
mean, I mean
then,
that's somewhat of an odd statistic, right? Because
right, it is.
but
It
you're, I don't know, like what that's. I mean, I find the first statistic you brought up a lot more interesting
Yeah.
uh,
I
about
mean,
the
she's coming to the conclusion that, you know, well, I guess at the well, this says at the University of California, race predicts SAT scores better than income class. That
uh,
is interesting.
right. I agree with that. That
Um,
is interesting.
so that kind of gets to, is there something culturally that is different, or is it just a emphasis? Is like what is driving that?
So I
Like,
mean, just well, to tie that into a different book. Uh, I mean, going back to Thomas Sowell's book, I would say yes. I'd say one of the main components of education is the culture. Like, does the culture you come from emphasize education?
mhm.
Uh,
Because I was thinking, so like I I mean this is this is definitely going to piss off some people out. But I remember I was when I was reading some of this, I was thinking back. Eighth grade, I played basketball for the middle school team. We played a team from Saginaw. Now this is like heavily black area, very a lot of good athletes have come out of this area. And I just remember the parents were just like shouting and like cheering, like this was like an NBA game. And I'm like, we're like in middle school. And I do remember there was a kid like on the other team that did dunk on us. And I'm just like, they're taking this like way, like the parents at least are taking it way more serious than like our parents. So like that's kind of what I was thinking about when I was like reading that. And then just for kicks, so like and like this goes to, and then like in the NBA, I looked up 2021 stats. This was coming from racial equality activist Richard Lapchick. 2021, about 73% of the NBA is black, but in the US, like only about 14% are black. So there's, a
well, it's
vastly
that
disproportionate. What's that?
yeah, that's also misleading because it would be really 6% is black male.
Sorry, say that again.
So I mean, everyone in the NBA is a male, so only 6% of the population is a black male.
No, no, no.
Or
That's all. But that's okay. Well, I didn't break it. I didn't know if there was a different split between the black males and females. But in the U.S., the stat I got was about 14% of people are black.
right,
So I guess that's, and then it's like we're swapped. So the whites are about 76%, but only about 17% of the NBA players are white. So it is like flip flopped. And I mean, I was just like, to me, like sports are very easy to think about. Like, and then I started thinking like, okay, so why? And this book is kind of saying like some of these people in universities, in particular, want to get a a diverse racial distribution. And I mean, I don't know if we want to stop there and talk, or if you had another point, but I kind of started looking into like, China and India. Like if we really like as a world, it's almost like 35% of the world's population is Chinese or Indian. And then if you ask, like, is that the distribution in most fields? Like, can you even name an Indian like Premier League player or a basketball player or all these fields that don't have the typical world distribution, and for whatever reason we're trying to make it that way in universities.
yeah. I mean, it's in my opinion, it's frankly stupid to try and get a breakdown of the world just based on like what you said. It's stupid to try and get a breakdown of the world distribution in a microcosm of the world. Like, yeah, I mean, there are no there aren't. I don't really remember a lot of Indians playing soccer growing up, but there are a lot of probably a vast majority of the world class cricket players are probably Indian.
Right, exactly. And
In
there's
terms
like
of,
no Americans.
well, no, there,
Right.
well, there'd be English,
English, but not American.
probably correct. Same with like you could say the same about like table tennis, badminton, a lot of racket sports,
Sure. Yeah.
a lot of non-tennis racket sports. The Chinese, Koreans, uh, Thai, Malaysians dominate, but
Hmm.
you wouldn't. No one complains that there are no Americans for that. Yeah, the universities, in my opinion, absolutely try and get a broad diversity group. Uh, I heard some statistics a while back and at work when I was just listening to YouTube clips, so everyone can take that for what it's worth. That we're saying that if universities accepted just solely based on meritocracy, the Ivy League would be close to 50%
Hmm.
Asian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what
Uh,
it sounded like from yeah, it seemed like the Asians were the most discriminated against, according to the scores.
yeah, and that's the thing that like I feel like people always no one ever looks when people say affirmative action, no one ever thinks of it in those terms, which is why I think it's kind of bad. If you're giving someone a special privilege, you have to take it away from someone else. And the people that you're taking it away from are at least as she would argue, it's the high achieving Asians.
Hmm.
Also coming from then going back to a economic standpoint, there are a lot of, still first generation Asians that are very poor, that work very hard and do very well, but everyone's kind of lumped in together as one group. So they're essentially discriminated against and
Hmm.
Uh, they have to do better, you know, than they should to get into colleges. Uh,
Hmm.
and you're not then granted, you're maybe not granted some of the same, I guess, scholarship opportunities that others would be. I mean, I'm not going to say anything, but just from a hiring perspective, I think she brought up. I mean, I guess if you want to cut me off, just feel free. I mean, like one of the main things I thought she was harping on was like discrimination and like this implicit bias where you're not like why why aren't like people of color or these minorities at the high end of some of these companies? Like why are they disproportionately not represented as like CEOs or like upper level management in these groups? And I guess the common phrase for it is like the guy what's the actual term? I think it's like the gap of racism or essentially when there's a gap or there's a disparity, people a lot of times will just immediately relate it to discrimination, which is I think somewhat intellectually lazy. But the point that Heather brings up is that in today's hiring practices, if you had a really qualified black applicant or women applicant or going into the LGBT the LG the gay like
Hmm.
lesbian applicant, would they do you actually think they would be discriminated against for promotion or hiring? Like I think it's just I personally think it's laughable. And anecdotally, I was at a dinner uh, when I was in grad school, and someone someone said that they were looking for a professor, but they were only willing to hire someone from group X and group Y. And I just remember being incredulous. Like I was like, how is this possible? Like you should be looking for the best person.
Hmm.
Uh,
I mean, I just saw Oppenheimer. I don't know if you saw it too, right?
yeah, I saw.
So, one of the ironic things was it sounded like the Germans actually discovered what would eventually lead to the development of the bomb. But because all the very good physicists were Jews, they basically didn't. I mean, I'm guessing the Jews probably would not have helped the Germans anyway, but because they wouldn't allow the Jews to like work, I think before a lot of the things started, I mean, they basically cut out. It's like cutting out the best talent in that specific thing is not good for business, and it literally cost them possibly the war.
Yeah, like
Um,
the underlying principles behind the bomb were discovered, I believe, in Germany. Now, don't quote me on this, but I believe
yeah,
they were actually discovered in Germany.
yeah, and it
By
sounded like they had if Oppenheimer the movie is accurate, I mean, it sounded like they had a 6 month head start on the Americans by the time those Americans discovered what they needed, what information they needed to develop the bomb.
I think that is relatively accurate.
Yeah, so it's just, yeah, it's just, there's a reason there aren't, I mean, there's a reason why certain people aren't seen like running around a soccer field, or that there are reasons for that.
So,
um,
so I think the best explanation, the best explanation I've ever heard is you can't materialize people at the in their if you're going to be like promoted to like upper level management, you would expect, or like a CEO, you would expect that would to happen your mid 30s to like mid 40s. Like that's when you're going to start making those moves up a company, right?
okay.
I don't know. I'm just asking. Do you think that's a fair timeline of like when that would probably happen?
For like, I
For
would say 40s, 50s.
okay, sure. Like you can't just materialize people with like a lifetime of skills in those fields and then
Mhm.
just say, we need to have this type of breakdown culturally across all the companies because different cultures do emphasize different aspects. Like they emphasize different things. And actually, Thomas Sowell wrote about this quite a bit in his book, Black Rednecks and White Liberals. So, sort of like what you were saying, how the NBA is made up of a lot of like basketball players. Uh, he was tying it. I hope I don't misremember or misquote him, but he was tying a lot of it into uh, family dynamics and like what the family emphasizes. So he tied a lot of it to Jews in the early like 1910s and 1920s. So in the early 1910s and 1920s, that's when Harvard put a ban or they put a cap on the amount of Jews that they would allow in the Ivy League, which is when then Brandeis, as the university, opened up to be a Jewish school. And the emphasis was, I mean, he states in the book, and I think it's talked about in a lot of other books, how the Jewish people were always a people of like books. They were always reading a lot. There was a massive emphasis on education. Same with like Asian cultures. There's always been a massive emphasis on like getting up, studying really hard, and really educating. Like, and I'm sure you have Asian friends. Uh, you have Asian friends, and you've seen this, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the actuaries are Asian. Yeah.
Right. So he was saying like those types of fields where you're going into science and like, yeah, I can relate to that. Like you need a lot of like familial support when you're going through a long type career that's focusing on some type of high academic achievement. It really does take a lot of support from your family. So he was saying like those fields require a lot more familial support. And he was saying in a lot of these other, he also talked about the Irish. From like Irish groups, you'll see a lot of like really popular Irish singers. If you think about it, you can probably think of a couple. A lot of Irish actors. They just culturally, those groups don't have as much familial support, and you get a lot more high achieving individual careers. So like acting, singing, sports.
Hmm. Okay.
It's just sort of an interesting take, I would guess.
Well, what do you think about the gender type of topics too, like the male versus woman?
I mean, I think it's like I get into this conversation all the time. Like, you know, I, I don't know what it is, but like I objectively can go look, and I'm sure you can go look at the classes you were taking, and they were probably primarily male.
Yeah, I mean, my math classes were primarily Asian males, and my econ class was a little bit more rounded, I guess, but still mostly males. And yeah, I'm sure you would probably see the same thing in your chemistry classes.
So yeah, so my early level chemistry classes were pretty split because everyone that wanted to go to med school had to take Gen Chem, Orgo, and physical chemistry.
Hmm.
But when I got up to the upper levels, it was primarily all men.
Hmm.
I don't think it's like it just it just is what it is. It just seems like men appear to enjoy uh, learning about chemistry and physics and math and engineering more than women do.
I think there's also like a competitive like aspect to it because I think for a lot of those fields, it's kind of like you're intellectually like combating the other people, and it's
Yeah,
kind of like I don't want to say like peacocking, but like yeah, it kind of is like you're kind of like you're wanting to show off or like dominate other people with your knowledge, and I feel like it's more in those hard sciences than other fields.
okay, yeah,
Um,
I could see that. But I was gonna say on the flip side, she brings up that the college gap is now 60-40 women.
yeah.
And that's a higher gap. That's a larger gap in the sexes than it was in the 70s. And now more women are now medical doctors than men.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Really?
but
Medical doctors?
yeah,
Really? Interesting. I
I
mean,
mean,
okay, here's a question.
sorry. It's more women are now, I think, progressing through med school. So like there
Okay,
may still be more male doctors, but that's just
gotcha.
because,
But you,
uh, historically, I think women were not allowed, or it was
okay.
very frowned upon. But now, moving forward, it's looking like there will be a lot more women doctors, which the common phrase is, women care more about people and men care more about things. So women go into fields that focus on looking at people, and men go into fields that focus on looking at things, which anecdotally, just when you look at the world, is how it appears to be. It appears to be generally what I see. I don't
Hmm.
know if you would agree with that.
Yeah, I think it goes, I mean, there's men and women are inherently different. And I mean, I just looked up, so a lot of the manual jobs are very heavily men. I mean, I was interested in welders just for an example, and there's over 400,000 welders in the US. What percentage do you think are women?
I would guess less than 5%.
6%. I was surprised it was that high. Um, and like, okay, and I'd be curious, are the women upset that there's so few women in the welding field? Because to me, it feels like it's very just like cherry picked for certain fields. And okay,
Or
and I
plumbers.
also,
Yeah, did you
yeah,
look up plumbers?
here, let me look at plumbers. Um,
Or electricians? I mean, for any trade skill.
yeah, I mean, welding was the first one that came to my mind. I'm seeing 3.5% of plumbers in the US are women. Also sounds high to me. I haven't met a single female
I've never
plumber.
met it. Yeah, I've never met a female plumber.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm curious if they're, does it bother you that the rate, or like, does it bother you that there's more women in some fields than others? Is there any field that you are upset there are more women than men?
No, no, none of this. The only thing that bothers me is when people don't take the best applicants. That's what
Mm-hmm.
bothers me. If I feel perfectly fine allowing people to go do whatever they want to do. I don't really care. The thing that bothers me is sort of what I was talking about earlier. Is when you have a lot of these high performing Asians, they get discriminated against and not allowed into school because they're Asian. That's what bothers
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Does it bother you that women make more in certain professions than men?
me. No,
Okay. So that,
I mean
that,
you're
that,
not
that,
saying. Wait, are you saying they make more because they're a woman, or
yes.
or you mean like a model?
Well, there's plenty of them. Strippers, models. I just looked up the top 10 highest paid male models. This is the top for a male model. I don't even know who this dude is, but
Yeah, I mean
it is fractions. We're talking like 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 in the not even like double digit percentages of what the top woman makes.
yeah, that doesn't bother
Does it bother you that female strippers make more than men? Or so, yeah, make more than men. Because like I looked up, this is from exotic Chicago strippers.com. Male strippers get paid $25 less per hour on average. And the breakdown is 90% of the exotic dancers, they call them, are female. It doesn't bother me one bit, honest. I don't care.
But does it bother you that the women's national soccer team?
It bothers me that sometimes females say they really want equal, but if they really wanted to be equal, there'd be one league and none of those female soccer players would make any team because we would have been playing with them in high school.
Well, to be clear, the U.S. women's national soccer team was offered the same deal as the men, and they then, I think this would have been in 2018 or 2019. They then turned it down, and
No,
then
I'm not talking about pay. I'm talking about playing in the same league.
oh, they'd be killed.
That it wouldn't no one would know who Megan Rapinoe is for a soccer player.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
then
you're
she's
correct.
advocating for you know
I think she's
all
advocating
this,
for trans women to play.
right,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah,
Biological males competing, and dominating, female swimming and female, track. And so be careful what you wish for, I guess. I just, yeah,
I mean,
it's,
that's such a weird. That's such a weird. I've never all the female athletes I know have had the common sense to acknowledge that that is just it's ridiculous. The only people I've ever heard, I mean, except for her, which just blows my mind that she advocates for that say that are people that have clearly never played sports. And you just anyone that's played sports, like when people advocate that, just you just sound stupid. Like, I mean,
there are certain sports that I'm sure females do better in. Like, at least like on the surface, maybe like balance beam in gymnastics. I'm not sure if men being bigger would be detrimental to their performance on balance beam, or like the equestrian type things, if you consider that. Like certain things I can see, but just, yeah, it's just there's inherent, you know, advantages to being both sexes. I guess is all I'm getting at, and it shouldn't bother any of us.
I mean, I agree with you. It shouldn't, but it seems to.
And then it got me thinking. Okay, so what is actually driving this? What like if someone were to ask you, what do you think is driving, and where's it coming from? Like
Uh,
so. Uh-huh.
So what I would say is I would say a lot of male characteristics at the very highest end are characteristics such like, if you go look at like an IQ chart, the way I've seen it described is that men men dominate at the extremes. So you're going to have a higher percentage of men that are like geniuses and men that are doofuses.
Hmm.
So on average, women are more intelligent than men. Like
Hmm.
the average woman is going to be smarter than the average man. But when you look at like the top percent of the population, it is going to be primarily men. So
Hmm.
when you look at the highest achieving fields in like corporate America, I guess the conclusion from that statement would be it's probably going to be primarily men. Not that it can't, like, a woman can't be there. Obviously, there are women CEOs of like major companies, there are women prime ministers, there are women politicians. But the people that are driven to those fields, like those, you have to work like 100 hours a week for years and years of your life to make it. People that I think men have more characteristics that drive towards those fields. So you then have a disproportionate amount of men. So I think what drives it is people see like, well, why are these fields dominated by men? Like the highest position, why is it primarily men? And people want a more egalitarian like breakdown.
But that, I
But
guess that's my question. What's driving the feeling that it should be like egalitarian, or like, I think that, yeah. But like, what is driving that feeling?
uh, what's driving that feeling? I think people, well, for one, I feel like we as a culture are moving towards a more socialist system, and I think that promotes a more wanting feelings of like equality amongst everyone. So I think that's part of it.
So do you think would you say true or false to like it's stemming from the universities?
Uh, that feeling, I could, I don't know if I would say that's all of it. I would say just historically, people have looked at things and they don't give any thought to it, and they just say, why is this, only one group of people at this top level? It should be more equal. Even
Mhm.
though at the end of the day, like, everyone is an individual. Like everyone, you don't just you don't just become you aren't just born as a high achieving like adult. Like you have to become that,
Mhm.
regardless of what you grew up as.
Mhm. But
I
like,
mean,
so why don't we hear it being talked about like from, the female welders union or the female plumbing crew?
because that is
Like,
not I mean, you're right. I think you're right with the university from an academic perspective. That is not a desirable job.
so I guess, so like, I mean, I've been in my head a lot today, like reading this book, and like some of it, I think just comes back to, so if it is stemming from the university, why? Why is it stemming from the university? And then I can't help but think, well, it's because the government is mostly paying the student loans. Most of the loans are coming from the government. So it would seem reasonable to suspect that the government is playing a role in what the universities are exposed to and what they're kind of pushed towards because of some overarching agenda. I can't get that out of my head really. Like, because I think it's still the number one asset on the US government's balance sheet is student loan debt.
I don't really understand what you're
I
saying the government is dictating the agenda of universities to make it to want it
somewhat to get more votes.
to
They,
to push to push this type of agenda though.
right? Like divide and conquer. Isn't that like politics 101 kind of, to like try to set up some, like a smaller population and then kind of take them under, like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of times if you just follow all the money, like I don't understand why some of these universities are spending so much money on some of these like diversity and inclusion type programs.
I think a lot of it is because it makes them feel good. I mean, have you? Okay, this is the thing. This is the thing that really gets to me. When I talk to like people that are like really, really on the left, uh, which I don't do as much as I used to because I now live in Alabama. But before, when I lived in Alabama, and I would talk to people that were really, really on the left, I one never thought they had any idea what they were actually talking about. I never really had the impression that sort of like what you talked about with affirmative action. I don't actually think it helps the people that it's directed at. And she points this out in the book. Uh, she uses the term, I believe, mismatch in the book, where you're putting people that are not students that are not academically ready for the rigors of the university. You then cause a higher degree of dropout of those minority students, or you have a higher degree of switching from, I believe, I believe the statistic was either Duke or North Carolina, where the minority students were coming in wanting to major in a hard science or econ, and then we're almost, like 60 to 70% of them are switching majors into a soft science because it was easier. Uh, so when you're switching away, the point of the education is to prepare you for a vibrant career, or to prepare you for a career, to get you an education so you can go have a job. There's nothing wrong. This is the other thing. Like the other thing she sort of talks about, there's nothing wrong with not going to an Ivy League school. We didn't go to Ivy League schools, but we both turned out all right. I mean, we obviously went to good schools. We went to a good school, but uh, I think the point, what she's saying is, if you go to a, I guess, quote unquote, lesser school where you're more, I guess, educationally ready for, your likelihood of graduating with a degree that will give you an actual future career, not like some like diversity degree, or not some, and when I say that I mean like diversity studies degree, or some like, like esoteric literature degree where you can't really do a whole lot and be easily transferable skills into, the working domain. Uh, it's it's just better for the minorities and the people that, not even the minorities, people that aren't educationally ready for those rigors. She talks about that. Malcolm Gladwell talks about that in David and Goliath, and Malcolm Gladwell would probably be one of the first people to be all for affirmative action, and he's talking about it. He's making that argument as well. So I sort of went on a tangent here. I forgot what I was originally responding to.
Um, was it the mismatch? Is that really what you were?
Well, that's what I started. That's sort of what I started breaking off on. But it was like, what is this leading to? I mean, I think there's definitely a push. Oh, they want to feel good, right? I feel like people in universities want to feel like they're helping people that are less fortunate. That in my time at university, that is one of the things that I always got. These people, and these when I say these people, I mean these academics that have worked their entire lives to achieve this stuff, like what they've achieved. They want to feel. I feel like it's a moral. It's always a moral argument. People, when I would argue with people on the like very left, I feel like they wanted to morally grandstand against me to say I am morally better than you because I care about people less fortunate than us. That was the argument I felt like I was always getting. Not whether the bones of the argument should be, how do we actually help these people? Like, how do we help people that are poor and impoverished become successful in life? And telling them that they are academically or educationally ready to go compete against people that are better prepared than them is not the answer. It is to, in my opinion, put them against people that are at the same academic level, so they graduate with a degree that is useful in the workplace, and then you can go get a real job and get work experience and become a productive member of society. And then once you do that, you will be successful. And then you can, instill your work ethic into your kids, and then they will be successful. But to just say like, I feel like the arguments I always got was people just wanted to say, I'm trying to help people that are less fortunate, and they would then tell me that I don't care, and I would usually respond with like, I do care. I just don't think your solution is good, and I think it's just better for people to be instilled like the necessary tools in them to achieve, not just lower standards.
Mhm.
Sowell also talks a lot about how if you just raise standards like in schools, he talks in some of his books, he's talked a real lot about like inner city schools that had just really strict standards. And like the common belief is that if you just pour money into schools and like everything will all of a sudden be better. But that's often not the case. Like he's kind of showed, I mean, he obviously cherry picks his data. Like Heather McDonald's obviously cherry picking data to prove her argument, right? That's
Yeah,
like whatever.
because she would also say like it's not an income thing. Like when you say you want to help the less fortunate, she's basically showing it doesn't have to do with income.
Right. It's about instilling like, I feel like it's more about just the work ethic and uh, the the standards. Like you have to have high standards. If you have high standards, people will raise to those standards. If you have low standards, people will like jerk off and to go to those standards. I find the vast majority of people will rise or lower to the standards that they're allowed to rise or lower to. Uh, and that's just sort of what I think. So Souls talked on a numerous occasions inner city schools where the teachers and the culture of the school was, if you don't want to do the homework, uh, you're going to be kicked out. If you're going to disrupt the class, you're going to be kicked out. You will be punished for disrupting the class, and it's expected that you do the work and you learn. And the kids are all then successful. It's really, I don't really think it's like, you know, it's not some like it's not some like magic trick. If you just study hard and work hard, you will be successful.
Hmm.
I mean, obviously that makes it sound really easy. Like it takes a lot of work and it's hard. And yeah, I mean, I would actually say I am somewhat in favor for uh well, I would never say I'm in favor for uh preferences based on race or sex. I would say for college admissions, I would grant some leeway to economic preferences. So kids coming from poor income households, if they showed some type of if they were close to the line, I think I would argue for some preferences towards them. But I wouldn't break that down by
Anyways.
I wouldn't break that down by race. I had a when I was back in Michigan, I had a lovely conversation with our wonderful sister, pretty much arguing that exact same thing. And she kept saying, well, like, what about if someone like doesn't have the opportunity? Shouldn't this was when affirmative action got overturned. Uh, she was saying if someone's like really poor, shouldn't they be granted an opportunity? And I go, yeah, if they're really poor, they should be. But what does that have to do with race or sex? And I don't know. I don't know. Does Raina listen to our show?
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. Well, Ray, if you're listening to this, you can call me after to tell me if I've misrepresented your point. But she essentially would never. Just kept dodging the question when I would ask her like, what does it have to do with race? Like, and it, yeah, so it is what it is.
Yeah,
I feel like I just went on like a
it's okay.
rant. I don't know. Did it
Uh,
make any sense? Was what I was saying? Did it
yeah,
make sense?
yeah. Some of it for sure. Well, I mean, what are you gonna let's wrap this episode up, I think. What are you gonna take from this book, if
Hold,
anything?
hold up. There was one more thing I sort of wanted to talk about. What what
Sure.
what what was your opinion on some of the like sexual harassment on college campuses? I mean, we've already touched on some of the more polarizing topics of the book. Let's just finish the home run here.
I mean,
What was your
once
feelings on that
again,
chapter?
it seems like it just I feel like we're living in 1984. Like the definitions keep changing. Like they're talking about rape, and obviously, if you get raped, it's awful. But then it seemed like they wanted to inflate the numbers. So then they're basically, I think they changed it to like fondling.
Yeah.
I don't want to make like light of this, but like those two are not the same thing.
Oh, absolutely
And
not.
they were kind of breaking down how often it was actually like sent to court, I guess is the right, like how often these people that said they were raped actually took them to court on charges. And some of the, I don't know, it just,
Yeah.
I guess I'll stop there.
So like just for one, I find it weird that if someone's actually raped, why is the university involved at all? That should be a criminal thing, and it should go to criminal court. Like you shouldn't have Title IX, the university's Title IX, uh, the Title IX office involved with that at all. It should be the police. And it should be a police investigation. And I think what she was saying was that when that actually happened, the evidence pretty much showed that it was at least consensual or it was a lot of times regret. But the thing that I actually found, I found that chapter to be one of the more hard to believe chapters in the book because the way she was describing it, she made it to me sound like that the universities were trying to promote that there was a problem of sexual harassment on college campuses. Was that the feeling that you got from the book?
Yeah, exactly. That, I mean, and that comes back to, I feel like, I mean, this is speculation that I can see this happening though. If you want a certain part, I can see the government getting involved on this too, like wanting to, support females, dump all these resources in, trying to plant influence in the universities through this avenue. Like that's kind of what I came back to thinking about again.
Like I said,
I can't help but think about the 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 fact that so much of the student loans are owned by the government. I can't get it out of my head.
so like okay, that I think that's interesting because like to me when I was reading that I was thinking why would you want to if what she's saying is true, which is that this is not to obviously sexual harassment, sexual assault, rape do happen. But if you were a student campus, why would you want to inflate those numbers? Because if that's sort of what she was saying is, you know, if really those rape numbers are true, why would parents send their daughters to college? Why would you want to inflate those numbers? Because as soon as she said that, she was like, I was like, yeah, there's no way 1 in 5 people are raped. I just, I guess unless if you're defining it in a totally different way than what I am.
Mhm.
Because then yet again I agree with because I was thinking if I had a daughter and that was true, I would never send her to college.
Right. Or there would not be as many, if it was really that high, there wouldn't be as many girls going to parties to begin with. Like
Yeah.
if it was a real serious threat. And I think it kind of just it built some sort of like victim mentality, or like I'm scared, I need you to protect me type of feeling. Like I now feel better that there's some center that's for, I forgot what the name of the centers were, but and the centers barely get any calls on campus.
I mean, yeah, that one to me was just the most bizarre. It's like, why would I mean, I guess I get where you're coming from, but I just like could not wrap my head around like why you would uh like want to. Yeah, I don't I got myself into trouble talking with another female, sort of talking about this. Uh she sort of countered with like she told me some anecdote about when she was at a bar and some guy like creepily like talked to her, touched her on the stomach, and I kind of countered with like, if this happens so often at a bar, like why do you go to bars? Like if it's really so awful, uh, which, as you can probably guess, that didn't go over well.
Yeah. So what are you taking away from this book, Al?
I don't know. There were definitely some points. I guess my last thought was there were definitely some points when they were talking about med school admissions that I definitely sort of had some thoughts of like I remember I think I was in like the 93rd or 95th percentile on the MCAT, and I couldn't even really get I don't think I could get I didn't really get any interviews. And I had a relatively high GPA, so I sort of was thinking like, was I being
Wait, you were in the top like 7%, you saying? What'd you just
on
say?
the MCAT?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't exactly remember. I think I was in like the 93rd percentile. Second
Dang.
time I took, second time I took it, yeah. The first time I took it, I didn't do that great. Second time I took it, I did.
Do you know what percentage of people taking the MCAT typically get into med school?
No, I have no idea.
Okay. I guess that would be important then to determine. But
I mean, I could.
interesting.
I mean, this was also almost a decade ago, so I could be getting
Yeah.
those numbers wrong. Uh, but yeah, I just I couldn't even get an interview, and I had a relatively good GPA. So I was sort of wondering, it's like uh, did people like did they screen me out because I was competing only against the top tier of like white males?
Hmm.
I don't know. All in all, I'm happy with how my life's turned out. So I'm not just sort of as I was reading that, I kind of thought about it. Uh, and I thought about it obviously enough to bring it up to you. Uh, but yeah, I mean, my takeaway, I don't know. I sort of just read this book. I feel like I've now committed myself to reading this book called The New Jim Crow, because I've gotten so much flack about reading this book in some of my social circles. I'm now going to read The New Jim Crow, and we are outside of this podcast with some of these people I couldn't get to come on the show. I'm going to now discuss both books with them, and I'm sure it will be a wonderful time.
Okay.
I've started The New Jim Crow. It's kind of interesting. Uh, I'm about a third of the way through it. So, okay, I would say.
Okay.
My main takeaways from this book, I mean, I would say her depictions of universities and what universities want, uh, in my objective experience, are correct. What
Yeah,
about you?
I guess my thoughts are, universities better be careful, because I think people are starting to catch on that maybe, there's alternatives. I mean, she brought up that I think it's called Great Courses. I know Jordan Peterson's coming out with a university, basically like an online university to take classes. that might be more beneficial to actually getting a job. And they have what's it called? Is it like the master classes with like Chris Voss, like art of negotiation. Like there's all these alternative education systems. I mean, I paid $8,000 for a land flipping class last year. Like
I mean, yeah, you could go.
I think people are waking up, and if the universities aren't actually producing, it's bad for business what they're doing. So I think they're gonna have to change, or something's gonna break.
Well, yeah, I think you're totally right. So I mean, sort of like your land flipping, I think you can spend about $10,000 or $12,000 and go do those coding academies
Yeah,
where they more
yeah,
or less guarantee you a job at the end. So I mean that to me, a like 6 month coding academy class. I have some friends that have done that and got good jobs out of it. Like 6 months sounds a lot better. 10 grand, that sounds a lot better than 4 years of anywhere
right.
between like 20 and 50 grand a year. Or I guess community. I mean, you could obviously go to school cheaper than for the community college. I don't know how good of a coding education you're getting at a community college, but
Mhm. Yeah,
but that's a good point. I think you are correct there. Even trade schools, I feel like trade schools are finally coming back around.
right. I actually toured the NASCAR Institute a little north of Charlotte. I mean, unbelievable facility. I think it was like 20 grand, and in like 9 months, you could be like a welder or an auto mechanic. I mean, those are good jobs.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and you don't need to go to college for those.
I mean, Dad,
Um,
when I was home, Dad was telling me about his long-term hairdresser's son got he's doing a 2-year program at Consumers Energy to be one of the guys that climbs the poles in
uh,
storms. And after his apprenticeship, he was going to be making like 110 or 120. I mean,
amazing,
that's solid. Can you imagine if you had that much money when you were 20 years old?
right?
Like imagine how rich you'd be now. I
Right?
often think about that. If I had a real income from the time I was 20 to 30, how much more money I would have instead of
Right?
making 30 grand a year
The
doing
opportunity cost is very high those
right.
years. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think universities should be on alert.
But on the same note, for the very high end, obviously you're always going to need to go to college if you want to be like a doctor
Yeah,
or a
yeah, true.
any type of very specialized engineer. Even really for what both of you and I have done, you'll still have to continue to go to college.
Well,
Uh,
I wouldn't have needed necessarily, because you just take the actuarial exams. They take place of the like the college. You don't have to go to school necessarily. But the thing for me was I would have never been exposed to that had I not gone. That was kind of the kicker for me. So that's
yeah.
why it was good for me to go, because I was exposed to people that were also involved in that, because I had no clue what an actuary was.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my main benefit of college was I met really smart people that, you know, were not from our small hometown in Michigan. Uh,
Mhm.
I mean, you
Yeah,
met like you knew some princes, didn't you?
yeah. Foreign princes. We don't say their names. Okay, Al, you want to take us out?
Yeah, I can take that, I guess. I guess please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you would like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to would be greatly appreciated. Lastly, if you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. I'm Alex Allwild. With me, as always, my brother Jack. Jack, hopefully we don't get canceled too hard for this episode,
Yeah,
but
I'm worried. I'm worried, Al.
I don't think we made any like truly, you know, I guess the word going around is saucy takes on the internet.
Okay. Okay.
But I guess with that said, the the next book we're doing is this one I actually have is Atomic Habits by James Clear. This is, I think, the last book in this year's or this season's draft. Is that correct, Jack?
That is correct.
And then,
been
so
quick.
yeah, it's been quick. So we'll have another draft coming up in probably like a month or a month and a half.
Yeah. Should be fun. I've heard a lot of great things about this book. A lot of people are saying like this is a book they read every single year. Just to brush up on getting those habits nice and tidy. So
I guess
mhm.
well, I was going to say, with that said, so for the next book draft, Jack, should we do another? Are we going to do another classic, or are we going to just go back to, just picking nonfiction?
I think we need to do a TBD on that one. I'm not sure.
Okay, okay. To be
But
determined.
if the listeners have a strong preference, please let us know. Did you like Slaughterhouse Five? Did you like 1984? These are the things we want to know.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, Jake, as
Bye.
always, it's been a pleasure.
Pleasure.